Shashank,
Yeah.
what the heck? Why is everybody talking about DeepSeek now? We've been talking about it for the last month, and now a month later, NVIDIA crashes. I've been saying back since October that I was looking, I think it was October 19th,
That's
that
true.
NVIDIA was way overvalued and that it's coming down and the marginal cost is going to zero for all these models. And now it's like, okay, Wall Street finally agrees with well, me and also us, right? Like, what the heck? Like, I do not understand why there was such a delayed reaction. DeepSeek was like the biggest thing in the tech community back in December, and now uh, at the end of January, like the market finally crashes in response. Like, it's like imagine you're at a comedy club and somebody tells a joke, and then it's like 10 minutes later, ha, right? I don't get it. Like, what the heck? What do you think this is?
I think it's because the comedian is talking about a very inside joke that only a few people get initially, and then everyone starts catching on to what's going on. So yes, Mark, you were right. I think you were talking about the market being at like an all-time high, being overvalued, and seeing like a crash coming soon. And a lot of investors have been saying the same thing. I think Buffett has the biggest cash reserves that he's had in like a long, long time. Michael Burry, the guy behind The Big Short, has been selling most of his holdings, and this is a common sentiment throughout. And to your point about DeepSeek, yes, you also mentioned DeepSeek, and initially I was a little skeptical, but I came around to it, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool model. And yeah, so let's talk about DeepSeek a little bit. I think if you've been living under a rock, maybe you may not have heard, but it is all over the news. And it is peak hype when your dad calls you up and he's like, have you heard about DeepSeek?
Actually, my dad also called me up and asked about DeepSeek. DeepSeek, yeah.
You,
He's like, hey, what's this Chinese AI thing?
it's peak hype when people at CBS are talking about a machine learning model from a tiny Chinese hedge fund side project. It is peak AI hype right now. So DeepSeek, if for those of you who may not know, is a model released by this research AI arm of a hedge fund called Highflyer. It is a Chinese company worth about $8 billion or something. And these are super smart quant traders who all, I think, went to the same university, very, very proficient in mathematics and algorithms. And they decided with ChatGPT and AI booming in the last 2 years to focus on building their own models and seeing what they could come up with. And they've been working on this for a while. They did DeepSeek version 1, version 2, and version 3, which came out a couple months ago. And now they released DeepSeek R1, which is their reasoning model to compete with OpenAI's O1 model, which is also a reasoning model. And I think the reason why the financial markets are reacting so strongly is because this whole time, people are thinking that OpenAI was still in the lead by a wide margin because no one could compete with them on reasoning. Yes, we have Claude, we have Google Gemini, we have other open source models. Facebook has been working with Llama for a while. And even DeepSeek came out with their non-reasoning, just regular LLM, DeepSeek version 3, a couple months ago. But OpenAI, still in the lead. Even today, they are still in the lead with their O3 model, which they haven't released to the public, but beats the O1 model by a wide margin for like these really complicated IQ tests for spatial reasoning. But anyway, I think people were reacting so strongly because for the first time, it doesn't seem like OpenAI is that in the lead anymore. And this Chinese company is able to compete with OpenAI's O1 model by like 2-3 orders of magnitude. So we don't actually know how much resources they've spent on the R1 model, but people have been throwing out numbers like 6 million, 5.5 million. And we can get into the details of how they came up with that, but it is safe to assume that it is in the same order of magnitude. So they spent maybe like single digit millions of dollars, let's say 6 million, And OpenAI, how much have they been spending?
I don't
Like
know, billions of
billions,
dollars for sure.
hundreds, like so much money, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars on their models. So that is like a massive margin, and it is just upending the entire industry. Everyone is like rethinking and reevaluating how they should be pushing this industry forward, how they should be building their models.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that one other thing that is there in addition to actually beating OpenAI, because I don't think if you was just beating OpenAI from another country that you would see the severe market reaction. I think DeepSeek did something very specific that caused the market to crash, and specifically NVIDIA to crash, right? So in the news, there's always been this talk about the scaling laws, right? So it turns out that when you give more compute and more data and more energy into these AI models, you will make it so that you're able to get better results. However, DeepSeek, they turned that on their head and they said, hey, look, we can use less compute, maybe a similar amount of data, we don't know, but less money overall, and we're able to get similar results. So I think what it is all these companies overbought, right? If you have all these companies like uh, Facebook and Amazon and Google and Microsoft, all these big tech companies just throwing money at NVIDIA, and they're buying literally tens of billions of dollars worth of GPUs. And then they find that another company could do it at maybe 1/20th of the price that they've been spending.
1,000th,
1,000.
100th or 1,000th.
Oh,
Huge order of magnitude.
okay. So if I spent $10 billion on GPUs and I find out that I can get something almost as good for like 5 million or 10 million bucks, right? Like some of their salaries are probably worth more than that, right? You will make it so that I think these companies are going to say, look, we bought enough. We have enough GPUs for NVIDIA. Let's just use what we have. So what I think is going to happen is the server farms that were just being filled with GPUs uh, are just going to use what they have. And then maybe if the companies had some ongoing orders with NVIDIA, they're not going to cancel it. But then there's not going to be the new orders. So NVIDIA is not going to crash overnight, but it's going to just be a slow demise where it was kind of like the crypto prices, right? NVIDIA got really high during the 2017 crypto market. And then when the Bitcoin price crashed, NVIDIA went down with it. And I think that with NVIDIA, you're going to have, I mean, you're just going to have less companies needing to spend so much money. And the actual money from NVIDIA is going to come from where they had all their money before, right? They're going to get it from the individual consumers. They're going to get it from some companies who want to, build up their AI research arm. They're going to do some inference, right? So some people are going to buy regular GPUs. They're going to buy their 5090, they're buy their 4090, whatever. But I think that these giant orders where people are writing $100 million checks or $100 billion checks, whatever it is, or $500 billion with the Stargate project, right?
Yikes.
A lot of those are going to dry up, and NVIDIA is going to go back to where it was. So I was looking, and I think NVIDIA is trading on like, what is it, like 140, 150 right now?
I think maybe it's down 10%
Yeah,
ballpark.
I remember it was down like
It was,
20%.
yeah.
We can check. So as of January 30th, 2025, NVIDIA is trading at 124.91.
But it was down close to 20%, and now it's corrected to about 15% down.
Yeah. And I think that if you look at a year ago, so if you look at year to date, NVIDIA was traded like $60, something like that. So I would not be surprised if NVIDIA goes back to where it was a year ago. So I'm not sure, but I think it could easily go another 50% down for what was. Now, not financial advice, but I would not feel super confident about NVIDIA in the long term. Now, I still got AI. I want to make that abundantly clear. I think AI will change the world, but it's just a little bit overpriced right now and also overhyped. And I think that this DeepSeek was a correction, but I don't think it's corrected enough, honestly. And I think that we're going to see a lot more compute go to the edge. And when I mean the edge, I mean it's going to be AI running on your smart devices. Like we will have probably something like your phone, right, running AI locally without hitting the server. It's gonna have your smart home devices, your Googles, your Alexas, your things. I think that a lot of those will eventually be running more towards the edge, right? Um, I don't know anything, right? But I think that we're gonna see, devices like that start moving locally. All obviously, I think there will still be the inference done on the server side, but I think we'll see a lot of these devices eventually move over to the edge. Um,
I love that train of thought, but let's talk about NVIDIA a little bit.
yeah,
I think you're right. I think all these massive investment projects, $500 billion from the Stargate project announced by POTUS, close to like 65 billion announced by Meta for their data centers. OpenAI themselves single-handedly, supposedly committing close to $100 billion. XAI building server farms for who knows how much money. I think Zuckerberg had an interesting comment about this. I forget if this was after DeepSeek or before DeepSeek, but he was like, he's okay with overpaying for computing and spending a little bit too much as opposed to not spending enough and being compute constrained. So yes, I agree that people are realizing that they can reach a really high level of performance with these models without spending a significant amount of money. But there's a lot of caveats over here. We can drill down a lot into this, but I think this wouldn't have been possible if there didn't exist a GPT-4o or a Claude 3.5 or a Gemini 1.5 Pro, because there's a lot of speculation behind how they actually came up with DeepSeek V3. How do they generate the training data required to build such a proficient model? And a lot of people believe that DeepSeek has been distilling the Claude 3.5s, the OpenAI GPT-4os, and using these bigger, better models to create training data and then train their smaller model. So we don't actually know. This DeepSeek model didn't come out before GPT-4o, so we can't say for sure how they actually built a model from scratch, but it is a ridiculously amazing achievement regardless. They've done a lot of optimizations, algorithmic that we spoke about a couple episodes ago. And recently I was reading about how did they actually come up with all of this, given the trade bans and the fact that NVIDIA hasn't been allowed to ship their greatest and best GPUs to China. So these engineers are ridiculously smart. They've figured out how to use a lower powered, a lower memory capacity GPU and train these models without CUDA. Everyone talks about how essential CUDA is to the ML ecosystem, especially during training. And they drilled into the low level architecture and wrote drivers for, I think, interprocess communication to train these memory constrained GPUs from scratch.
did they really?
They did,
Wow.
yeah. So they, to get into specifics, they didn't have H100s like all the big dogs do. They had H800s, which is like a slightly less powered. It has a significantly lower memory.
So for the listeners out there, H100 is NVIDIA's top dog GPU.
Yes.
Right.
It was the one that was most recently announced late last year, the Hopper series.
So each one of those GPUs, what is it, like 50 grand or something? Let's see if I can find it.
Uh,
Well, I don't
or
know.
actually,
I
H is the previous generation. Blackwell is the newest generation.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Actually, I found one online for $30,000, and then it was like the market price from NVIDIA was like $43,000
Yeah.
for one of these graphics cards.
Yeah. So it's pretty expensive. And I forget the rough numbers, but they used about $5.57 million worth of GPUs in order to train their models. And they did this on memory constrained devices without CUDA. And
Oh, and then I just feel like we should define CUDA.
Yeah.
So CUDA is basically the software to interact with NVIDIA's GPUs.
Yeah. So in order to get the most out of a GPU, you want to use all of the processors that it has in parallel. So if you have a task out there on a regular computer, you're going to run it and your CPU is just going to run it sequentially. So do this, wait for it to finish, then do that, wait for it to finish, then do this, and so on. But a GPU has all of these little computation units that can run things in parallel, millions and millions of things in parallel. And that lends itself really well to machine learning tasks, which have to do a lot of matrix multiplications, which have to do math on arrays of numbers in parallel, because each array is independent of each other, and you can like multiply this row of numbers by some other number in parallel at the same time. So in order to get a hardware device to do this kind of complex parallel math, you need some interface between these two things. So that's where CUDA comes in.
So which things are you having the interface between?
This fancy matrix multiplication and all these transistors that exist in parallel.
Okay, I think I'm a little bit confused on how that works. So okay, so a GPU is a thing that can do run lots of things at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So we're able to do so when we say parallel computation, we just mean a lot of stuff at the same time. So whereas
As opposed to CPU, which does it sequentially. It does one very complex thing at a time.
I thought
Or a few.
yeah, so it's like a CPU is like the chip in your computer, which can run maybe like 8
Depending on how
things.
many cores.
Yeah.
An 8-core CPU.
So maybe 8 things at a time or 16 or whatever. But a GPU can run like billions of things all at the same time. But the
things that it runs aren't very complicated. They're very simple instructions.
Okay, so I could do like 2 plus 2 like a billion times all at the same time. And then I could have
Or multiply
some numbers together all at the same time. But a CPU, I could go and then do whatever I want. I could simulate the Big Bang, but only only simulate 8 Big Bangs at a time.
Exactly. But in order to actually do a billion different multiplications at the same time, you need some device drivers to run those calculations on these transistors. And
So, wait, hold on. This is still actually complicated for me.
Okay.
So you say you have a device driver. So a device driver would just be another piece of software that has the actual chip that runs. Actually, I'm confused because you said the device driver, which has something on the transistor, but I thought it was running on the GPU.
don't quote me on this. I'm paraphrasing a lot of things that I assume is how it works. But a device driver is a low-level piece of software that takes in a bunch of instructions that you're sending it to do, like a billion different multiplications, and then takes it and makes sure that it is utilizing the GPU's parallel processing nature to run all of those operations in parallel.
Okay. So the device driver is a piece of software that takes some data that will then work with the actual physical hardware to run whatever computation that I want.
That's my understanding. And I think CUDA also makes it very easy in software to be able to do this. So you would have like, let's say this neural network interface where you have this tensor or a vector of an embedding matrix, which represents some concept like a cheeseburger. And you want to multiply it by some other matrix like healthy to get like this other concept of a healthy cheeseburger. So to multiply these two concepts, you're multiplying vectors, and CUDA would make it really easy to multiply these two different vectors and use all the transistors on that GPU.
Okay, so so I can understand. When we have vectors, a vector is just a bunch of numbers, right? And then all these numbers are used to represent a specific concept, right? So then if I want specific concepts of things to interact with each other, right? Then I can use my GPU to have these big concepts interact with each other all at the same time.
Yeah.
And then I can do that very quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was on a CPU, it'd be just very slow,
Right.
potentially. Okay.
And so this CUDA layer is sufficiently complex that other companies don't have an equivalent that makes it easy for machine learning engineers, researchers to use this this layer.
So in other words, to say NVIDIA is the top dog in training these machine learning models because they're the easiest software to work with their hardware.
Yeah.
And all the other companies that are doing these training is arguably more complex. I've heard that AMD is harder to work with.
Yeah.
And even though AMD has cheaper GPUs with potentially equivalent compute, people can't use it as easily because it's just more complicated to work with. Would you say that's fair?
Agreed. Yeah. And excuse me, I've been a little sick, but I feel like this announcement is just way too exciting to take a break. But yeah, so these researchers, engineers at DeepSeek were able to write their own abstraction layer to take advantage of all the transistors in GPU and do the training that they needed for DeepSeek, which is just mind-boggling, unheard of anywhere else.
So basically, one of the optimizations, because Shashank, you read the paper, right?
Yeah.
You've read the paper on DeepSeek. You are kind of the go-to guy for how DeepSeek works.
In this room, sure.
Yes, in this room, between the two of us, you know it way better than I do.
Sure.
So, of all the things,
Although this wasn't in the paper, this was outlined, excuse me, in some other articles for how they train some of the previous DeepSeek models, because they've been employing all these tactics for a long time. And R1 is just a culmination of all of the effort that they put in for a year or two.
okay. So, would you say that it's fair to say that DeepSeek didn't do anything super revolutionary? It's all just standard engineering, but they were just focusing on just getting all of the optimizations that they possibly could and taking advantage of the hardware and software tweaks in order to get the costs down as efficiently as possible.
Yes and no. So yes, I think they benefited from a lot of algorithmic improvements that they made for their previous V3 model. For the R1, maybe let's talk a little bit about how they came up with R1. It was really interesting. So what is a reasoning model? So if you think about an LLM, it's primarily trained on a lot of text from the internet, which is Reddit, websites, Wikipedia, and there's so much data out there, and it's pretty easy to get text from the internet. But for reasoning, how do you get reasoning?
So like, okay, so if you have a regular LLM, you ask a question, it'll give me some sort of one-shot answer. So for example, if I ask,
It'll spit out a bunch of words at you.
right. So like if I say like, how tall is Mount Everest? It'll give me some sort of response.
Factual opinion, if you ask it to tell you a story, whatever it spits out, the text is like a next token prediction. It's just like an autocomplete, a fancy autocomplete, which works because it's seen so many other words in sequence on the internet.
So because I just trained this AI model on the entire internet, um, all of human intelligence, it's able to, based off of some input, it'll give me some sort of coherent output.
A textual representation of human intelligence. Yes.
Okay.
And this is an oversimplification, but yes.
Okay, cool.
Uh,
So then you're saying now DeepSeek R1, unlike ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is just like, I get input, it gives me output. This, I give it input, and then it thinks for a while. It does reasoning, whatever that is, and then it gives me some sort of smarter, better output.
Yeah. So with the ChatGPT, apart from just training it on all the text in the internet, you do have to do some little finessing on top of that. You need to get it to do like instruction following. So if you give it an instruction, you want it to like give you a meaningful response to that. You don't want it to give it an instruction, like a question, and have it just complete the question with more questions, because like that would also make sense in a data set with similar sounding text. But anyway, so what R1 did is they had an interesting aha moment, as they put it. They just kind of let the model um, run on its own and kind of play off of itself by generating a lot of output um, at the same time for the same question, and compare multiple outputs against each other and see which one was better. And over time, by doing this repetitively through like thousands and thousands of iterations, they noticed that it was able to generate longer and more chain of thought like responses, where it was thinking through its steps in order to come up with a solution for a complex question that required a lot of steps of reasoning.
Okay, so I'm a bit confused. So, you're saying that if I had a some sort of question
Yeah.
that I asked it, so I said, "Hey, DeepSeek, can you write an essay? I am wanting to write an essay for school," and it
No, no.
no.
Let's take a step back.
Okay.
These have to be reasoning questions, not creative writing.
Oh, okay. So, what would be like a reasoning question?
Mm,
Would a reasoning question be like, how do I
let's talk about NVIDIA. Why is NVIDIA's price dropping right now?
okay, that seems reasonable. So the question is, why did NVIDIA stock go down?
Yeah.
And then a reason
Based on these announcements, think about it, think through your steps, and give me an answer.
or, I just don't even wanna do that. I just wanna say, "Hey, ChatGPT, why did NVIDIA go down?" Or, "Hey, DeepSeek, why did NVIDIA go down?"
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Right? So then what would the reasoning steps be?
I guess one way is just to do a search query and check the internet, but assuming it can't do that, um,
Or let's say it can do that.
okay, maybe it does do that and looks at all the recent research that has come out from DeepSeek and realizes that, okay, there's a new model that's come out that's significantly cheaper to train, that doesn't require as many NVIDIA GPUs. Ergo, we don't need to spend as much. Therefore, NVIDIA will not be selling as many GPUs. Therefore, the price is overhyped. Therefore, it'll go down. So these require a lot of steps. And my assumption on the way ChatGPT has trained their O1 model is through reinforcement learning with human feedback, which has been their go-to strategy to make their models better and align with the way we want them to behave, like human beings. But that takes a lot of effort.
So reinforcement learning with human feedback would not be having the model try to think about. So what you're saying is, if we had the model go and then think about things, okay, like I'm going to do some research about some news articles about NVIDIA. I'm going to maybe look at the financials. I'm going to, kind of think about these things and come up with my own result. That's the R1 model. But with RLHF, the reinforcement learning with human feedback, that doesn't have a reasoning step. It's just you give one output or a couple outputs that the LLM could do to humans, and then they just pick the best one.
That's right.
Right? So in a certain sense, it's not actually with the RLHF, the reinforcement learning with human feedback, it's not actually coming to any good answer. It's just the answer that the humans who are doing the training prefer.
Mhm.
Whether it's right or not, it's just whoever was doing the training.
Subjectively.
Yeah, they just say, I like this answer better. And that's probably good, but doing this, what R1 is doing, it sounds better because now it's a way of potentially surpassing human intelligence because it could potentially reason more.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. So you you can only get as good as the humans getting you data with RLHF, with the human feedback. But theoretically, if you're this is not exactly RLAIF, but
What's RLAIF?
with AI feedback. Yeah. But theoretically, if you have a way for the model to like just play off of itself and generate more and more unique responses, you could potentially see an end product where it could be better than the humans. But yeah, so what they did, they called it uh, GRPO, Group Relative Policy Optimization, and I think the key word here is group. So they get a bunch of versions of the same LLM to create multiple responses and compare all these responses and see which one is the best. And there's a lot of technical nitty gritty that goes into why this is a little bit better because other models like OpenAI have like the regular LLM that is generating responses, and they have a separate model, a critic model that is evaluating the responses of the LLM and then judging whether or not this is good and then adding it to the training data.
So an example of this would be to say, hey, why did NVIDIA stock go down? And then the model might give three responses. Response one might be, well, it's a Monday and stocks always go down on Monday, because NVIDIA's got the Monday blues. Response number two might be, oh, this DeepSeek thing proves that people won't need to buy as many NVIDIA GPUs and the total number of orders may go down. And response number three may be like, oh, I don't know, a new iPhone came out and people may just be preferring to use that. And then the critique model will say, oh, well, the Mondays are sad. That doesn't make any sense. No, an iPhone didn't actually come out. That's stupid. And oh, it must be the DeepSeek one. That one seems like the best appropriate response.
Yeah. So with OpenAI, I think they would have had a critic model evaluate the responses, which requires a whole separate model with a whole separate memory footprint and a whole separate training pipeline to build that entire separate model. But given that DeepSeek is so resource constrained, they couldn't afford to do that. They didn't have the resources, the bandwidth, the memory. Um, so they were being scrappy. They just had the same model, evaluate a bunch of responses, think about which response is the best, and then continue forward. And another interesting thing that they did is build a really good reward system to figure out, okay, what is a better answer? And this is not a foolproof solution. So this is not the end all be all solution to all kinds of reasoning in all domains. They picked certain verticals like I believe math and coding and a couple other question answering domains. And they built reward systems that could accurately judge whether or not whether one response was better than the other.
So would that be maybe you have the LLM try to do a simple math problem? Let's say it's 2 plus 2.
Mhm.
And then you have something that uses a calculator to compare that answer to say, oh, this is 4, or maybe you run the code and see if it compiles. That could be some way to kind of judge objectively to see if these work. So you can
They
compare.
didn't have a code compiler. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'd be a way. It's
Mm.
like, okay, like this code compiles without any errors. This calculator also agrees with what you said. Therefore, this reasoning is probably correct.
Yeah.
And then maybe uh, if you're able to be correct in certain domains like coding and math, where it's really easy to verify quote unquote correctness,
Yeah.
you would hope that that would scale to or generalize to other types of domains as well.
You would hope, but they mentioned this in the paper too. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So it does not perform great in every single domain. The R1 model actually performs worse in certain domains that the older V3 model does better. For example, like function calling, creating structured output like JSON, complex like role-playing games, which is like creative writing and fiction. In these domains, the regular LLM was able to perform better.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, to summarize, I guess there was 3 main things so far that you mentioned that
Mhm.
DeepSeek did to reduce costs. 1, they optimized their hardware like crazy,
They did.
right? So that is impressive, right? Because most people don't get that much compute out of the hardware. 2, they have objective metrics that were able to determine if an answer was correct and if they're going towards the right direction.
Mhm.
And then 3, we could say that they were able to have multiple responses and try to figure out what the correct response was and appropriately judge that. So that seems all like good, solid improvements to
Yeah.
me.
And through all of these techniques, they noticed the the concept of reasoning emerge out of their training. They didn't actually encode any specific kind of reasoning steps. They did use some amount of seed training data, which was a small set of human curated, um, I think I would assume chain of thought style responses that they used to.
So what is chain of thought?
So um, if you ask one of these LLMs a question, maybe a year or two ago, they would just spit out a whole page of text. But now, if you ask ChatGPT's O1 a question, you can see a little loading bar that says thinking. And some of these models show out the thinking steps where it tries to process the kind of question you're asking, um, thinks about, okay, how do I solve this problem? What other information do I need to solve this problem? Okay, let's start laying out our assumptions. Let's start doing some reasoning. Let's consolidate all this information that we've outputted and then summarize the results and output that as a response to the user. So a chain of thought, um, as the name implies, is a sequence of thinking steps um, where you call the LLM multiple times on itself and then consolidate all of those thinking steps into a response.
So you have to manually call the LLM multiple
No,
times.
chain of thought is something that it does on its own.
Oh, okay. But the LLM under the hood is just calling itself multiple times. So it's like you take the output and then it basically automatically feeds the output back into the input and then just does that a bunch of times until
Yeah.
it gives you a final.
And this is another reason why NVIDIA's stock price has been shooting up sky high, because people have been anticipating that the inference time cost, because of these chain of thought style responses, is just going to keep going up. But you know, I I think there's a short bearish case for NVIDIA stock to go down um, because some of the overhyped valuation um, uh, might be overvalued right now. But I think uh, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, posted a tweet late night at like 10 p.m. or something after the DeepSeek R1 announcement came out, and he talked about Jevons paradox. Have you heard about this?
Jevons paradox. Yeah, I have heard about that. Isn't that where if you if something gets cheaper,
Yeah.
you end up using more of it,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So wasn't it like, I don't exactly know where it came from. Wasn't it's like, oh, if light bulbs got really cheap, you're just gonna have more light because actually, I mean, look around at this house right here. For reference, we're in Shashank's apartment right now, and he's got a lot of lights. So he's got string lights
I do.
all around the door.
Yeah.
He's got
He likes
lights
lighting.
on the left, got lights on the right.
Feels nice.
It's very bright in here. There's all these indicator lights. I think on your Google Home, you got like little lights that are listening. Lots of lights. And even think about like all the screens and stuff we have around. I mean, millions of little light emitting diodes in the screen. So you used to have like maybe one candle. I mean, not you, but people used to have like one candle to light up their home. And now we have literally tens of millions of lights in any individual person's house because the lights are so cheap.
Yeah.
You're just going, well, I'll just have as many lights as I want.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a limit. I mean, you can't just have your entire house just filled with lights. And also, you got to sleep, right? So you're going to turn them off eventually, maybe. But yeah, you use a lot more lights
Yeah.
because they're cheaper.
Yeah, so Jevons paradox was like in the 1800s, 1865, English economist when he was observing like the coal consumption at the time. He noticed how um, energy was significantly cheaper because of coal, and people thought that the coal prices would go down and no one would be manufacturing or like building coal plants anymore. But that is definitely not the case. I think we still have coal plants to this day. Maybe not as much as we used to, but there's still a lot of coal because as the energy of like something so general purpose, as the cost of something so general purpose goes down, the usage dramatically shoots up. Energy, access to internet. I think that's the whole reason YouTube, social media exploded because the access to cheap, high bandwidth data transfers was so easy to access that more people started using it. And I think paying $20 for ChatGPT may be like chump change for people here in the Bay Area, but if we're trying to provide access to um, universal intelligence for 7+ billion people, we need to make it significantly cheaper. And I think this is the step forward.
Yeah, so it'll mean that these LLMs, their price is gonna go down to essentially 0. So I think a lot of people have been talking about, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, that we're gonna see a lot more AI on the edge, and I think that we're gonna start seeing AI built into, like, everything, right? Like, your toaster in the future might have some sort of large language model where you can say like, "Hey, burn my toast to a crisp," and it'll be like, all right, no problem. And I mean, why not? You can have AI in your I don't know, like a doorknob and your lights and your refrigerator, and it'll go see what you have in your fridge and automatically order on Amazon exactly what you need. I feel like all these things are coming, right? And it wouldn't be economically feasible to do that now because it would just be expensive, right? But if it's gonna go, really cheap, uh, people, like, companies are gonna start building, I think, AI inference chips into all the devices. So actually, another aside, I think that nobody's been talking about this, but there are 2 companies that I think may do really, really well with AI inference. So, obviously not financial advice, do your own research, but I think that MediaTek and Qualcomm have really been underlooked, right? So, um, MediaTek and Qualcomm are 2 companies that make the chips that are used to run devices like cell phones, right? And I think that both of them are gonna potentially do well. Maybe not a lot of excess demand, but maybe a little bit of excess demand if you start putting this type of thing in your toaster, right? So where you used to have a dumb toaster, that could only, toast your bagels. And now you might have a toaster with your large language model built in. To do that, you need a chip. Who makes those chips? Qualcomm, MediaTek. Qualcomm tends to make higher end chips, which maybe will do well with this. And then MediaTek still makes good chips, a little bit more mid range to lower end chips that you see. So I think both of those companies are going to start doing a lot more with LLMs. And I'm not saying buy Qualcomm, buy MediaTek, but I'm not also not saying to not buy it. So yeah,
And hashtag not financial advice.
yeah, but full disclosure, just so I'm clear, I bought some Qualcomm a couple days ago. I bought some Qualcomm shares because I think it's a good idea. I'm not saying you should buy it.
I have not. I do understand where Mark is coming from, and I kind of had this thought for a while, but you got to be careful about applying engineering solutions to solving people's use case problems. So I've been in the smart home field for a while. I work at Google Nest, and I've been here for on the same team for about 7 years, and I've seen this space evolve, grow year over year, like close to 20%. But everything we've thought, Amazon has tried, given its amazing distribution, to make smart toasters, smart refrigerators, and smart all of these other appliances that people have in their home. But that's it's hard to kind of predict where a technology will end up. We kind of just have to see what the market wants. But in terms of specifically edge computing, I do think, yeah, I think edge computing will developers will focus more on edge computing because like it's cheaper, lower latency.
And also it's good, right? Because I think that DeepSeek proves that with not a lot of compute, people are getting this. I mean, not the full model of DeepSeek, but I got it running on my MacBook Air. Like this
Yep.
particular one I got running. I asked it questions.
Which model?
It was the 1.5 billion parameter one.
That's tiny.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could probably get that running on Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
So like it's pretty decent, right? And if you fine tune it for a particular use case, like toasting bagels, it could probably be pretty good. Honestly, I think that this is a game changer, right? Because in the past, a lot of these smaller models weren't that good. I mean, I'm not saying they were bad, right? I mean, Facebook came out with some good smaller models. OpenAI came out with good smaller models. Microsoft has their 5 models, which are pretty good. But I think that this DeepSeek one is like really good. And I think soon everybody's going to come out. They're going to probably copy a lot of DeepSeek's innovations and they are going to come out with some really good models. So, really, really soon, like basically now,
Yeah.
we now have really good.
So actually, speaking of really soon, Alibaba just released another model. I think it was yesterday, right after DeepSeek's R1 announcement, which is
better than R1. Okay, so very soon. But when I say soon, I mean yesterday. So now, based off of what we know about DeepSeek R1, the market will probably price this in like, this summer. But fine, you guys here heard it first. Edge computing is going to be the thing. Yeah, it'll probably get you paid at some point in the next like 5 years based off like how slow the market reacted to DeepSeek. But
okay. So my thoughts on edge computing. I do think more computing will move to edge devices because of yes latency, because the performance of these models is getting a lot better, and the cost. We don't have to startups don't have to pay a bunch of server bills to do a bunch of computation and then send it to people's phones, laptops, wherever. But I do think like the refresh cycle for a cell phone is getting longer and longer than it used to be. The refresh cycle for a laptop is not that long to begin with. It's like a couple of years. So yes, edge computing is going to get more popular, but not because people are going to keep buying more devices which uses Qualcomm chips and make the price of Qualcomm stock go up. But it's gonna take a little bit longer. As for AI powered toasters, refrigerators, that's like a prediction that people had with the previous generation of smart assistants. That hasn't panned out. I don't see that panning out really, but It's still pretty early. Too soon to tell.
Yeah, I don't know. So I get what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I think this is a fundamental difference between uh, the smart assistants of the past and ones that could potentially run locally,
I
right?
agree with you. Yeah.
So the ones of the past, all of those had to hit some sort of server, right? So these can run all locally. Like you could be disconnected from the internet and you can still toast. Like, because you don't want it where your internet goes out and then you can't use your devices, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to use it where your internet's out, you're camping, and you can still use a smart toaster. So I think that it's gonna be almost table stakes going forward. It's gonna be like, I don't know, a couple bucks extra for these companies to add a chip that will be able to give smart capabilities. And then, like, why wouldn't you want to have a toaster that costs like $5 more that can be smart, right? I think that it's gonna be like how we see pretty much every single car now ship with some sort of GPS in it, right? In the past, like 10 years ago, the GPS in your car would be some sort of additional add-on feature. Now you look at a GPS in a car and it feels old, right? Like now people want CarPlay, but it's there and it's good now, right? So I think that um, these companies like Qualcomm and MediaTek are going to go up, not because people are going to be buying more cell phones. I think the amount of cell phones they buy are going to be similar. It might even go down. It's just going to be everything else that people are going to add AI to that didn't have AI before, and now because it's going to be cheap and good and fast and uh, like you're just gonna see more of it, and that's why I think this edge computing is gonna go up.
So one comment on the smaller models. An interesting thing that I learned from this paper is the concept of distillation. So what they did and what they outlined in their paper was that distilling the larger models into the smaller models is way, way better than um, training the smaller models from scratch. So what that means is using the training data generated by these larger models and giving that super high quality curated data set to train the smaller models is is better than training the smaller models from scratch on the internet and using all these techniques to um, build a better model that's smaller. And I think that's something a lot of other companies, OpenAI has been doing that with their O1 mini model, which is like a smaller version of their bigger reasoning model. My prediction is that some of these bigger players, I mean, Google has already been doing it with Gemini Flash, I would assume. Don't quote me on that. I have no insider knowledge. Um, I would assume that Claude is gonna do something similar. Alibaba, Microsoft, uh, Meta, and Mistral, they're all gonna be making smaller distilled models with higher capability um, by using their higher powered models.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That
We're
makes sense.
we're gonna see a slew of very capable smaller models in the next few months.
Yeah, and I welcome it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the big models are awesome, right? I love big models. I mean, who doesn't? They're the best, right? But the fact that these small models are getting almost as good as the big models, uh, I still think they're worse. Um, but they're approaching to be good enough, and especially if you can give the small model like web search capability or capability to, I don't know, search your computer or something, um, and answer questions about documents, right? So like, if I could have a PDF on my computer, and I could be on an airplane with no Wi-Fi, and I could have the LLM be giving me summaries of the PDF, if it could answer questions about it, if it could reason about the data in it. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. That's gonna be a great future. Now, none of these big companies would necessarily get paid. NVIDIA doesn't get paid because I'm running an offline model on my computer. Uh,
Unless you're running it with an NVIDIA chip, which is very possible.
does NVIDIA have chips on these small computers? Because I know there's like gaming laptops that have the NVIDIA chip, but I wasn't aware of a lot of these laptops that would use NVIDIA chips.
Yeah, maybe not as many embedded chips.
Because I know there is some, right? Like
I
NVIDIA,
think they focus on dedicated GPUs,
right?
which is focused on gaming.
Right. So I know there are the gaming laptops that have that, but I'm not aware. Maybe the audience will correct us if there are these, but uh like I mean you would never have an NVIDIA GPU on your phone, for example,
No.
right? But you might have a Qualcomm uh CPU or SoC on your phone, which
With an integrated GPU, yeah?
right. But then Qualcomm be making that.
Yeah.
Actually, TSMC makes that.
Well, sure.
But
Qualcomm's designing these.
Qualcomm designer, just like
San Diego, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, that's right. Okay.
So, I think, my, another, takeaway from this is that, as impressive as this is, it's still a little uncertain what this means for the next generation of frontier models. Because yes, DeepSeek made this amazing, amazing model, but it seems from everything that I've read and from the consensus online, from researchers and other heads of these AI companies, that it is unlikely that DeepSeek is going to make the next generation of frontier models. I think the best they can do is fast follow with a similar model, similar capable model when OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google pours in billions of dollars to create the next generation of models.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it has to be a fast follow and they can't make their own?
It's because of this concept of distillation. My hunch, and some other people have this guess, is that DeepSeek used OpenAI, Anthropic, or one of the frontier models to create training data for their models to learn and get better. Without that, it's just really hard to create high quality training data.
So would that mean if DeepSeek is using one of these now we don't know, but if we're assuming that they're using one of these big models,
Mhm.
that would mean that they would maybe never be able to get parity with that model. Um,
They might get like a similar level of performance and use some fancy techniques to like eke out a little bit more performance.
so you think that so do you think it's possible for DeepSeek if it were to train on, let's say,
Mhm.
Anthropic's model or OpenAI, right?
Mhm.
Do you think it's possible for them to use that for training and then to get something that's slightly better?
Maybe like a few fraction of percentage points better, but not an order of magnitude better. No.
But then if that's the case, right? If they were able to get something slightly better
Mhm.
using that,
Mhm.
could they maybe use that to create another model that is like, let's say, yeah, I train a model that's 1% better.
Mhm.
And then I use that model that's 1% better to train another model that's 1% better, rinse and repeat. And then, I now have artificial super intelligence. Do you think it works that way?
I don't really think so. I'm more saying like point fractions of a percent better. Um, I think the level of improvements that we need, um, the the improvement from like O1 to O3, O1 was what, like 30% pass rate at the ArcAGI test, and O3 was like a whopping 82% or something. That's like a massive difference. I think that's the kind of performance that we're looking for from like a, 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 a big number jump in versions.
Okay, so the for reference, we talked about this before, but the ARC AGI test is a benchmark that is used to evaluate these AI models. So it's kind of like if you guys ever taken those IQ tests where they will show you different patterns, you try to figure out what the next pattern is. ARC AGI is like that, which is actually it shows different things that are pretty easy, or I shouldn't say easy. I actually find them kind of hard, but they're easy for humans. When I say easy, I'm putting that in air quotes for the listeners. They're easy for humans, but hard for AI. And maybe we'll start getting better at those types of tests, is what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. I think you covered most of it.
Okay.
There were a couple other announcements. OpenAI released Operator, but maybe we can save that for the next episode.
Yeah, I think this is all about DeepSeek.
I guess another footnote is they also released what was their other model? Janus.
Oh yeah,
70.
Janice.
That
Yeah,
was their competitor to the image generation models, the Stable Diffusions, the Midjourneys, the DALL-E 3. It is not as good, but it's okay. It's decent. It just shows that this research powerhouse is just churning through all these different models, all these different domains, and they're gonna keep at it. And I think video, audio is the next frontier, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few months we see a competitor to OpenAI's Sora, the video generation model, or Google's VO2, which is also an amazing video generation model. But I'm curious to see if they can compete, given that data is really hard to come by. And Google, with YouTube, seems to be the only one who's gotten video generation right.
So, yeah, I want to wrap this up soon, but um, do you think that the U.S. as like a country should be worried? Do you think that the United States is still ahead in AI research, or do you think that China or in like the DeepSeek team is winning here? And I don't want to necessarily say like this is a new Cold War, but it sort of kind of feels like an AI Cold War,
Yeah.
where everybody's talking about this. Every feel says this is kind of like the Sputnik moment,
Yes.
right? Where it's not the Sputnik moment where Russia
I
had
think it was only Andreessen Horowitz who mentioned that, but yes, it's
right,
circulating the interwebs.
right, where Sputnik, which was the satellite launched by Russia in the 50s or 60s, I think. And everybody saw it just blinking over the United States. And now everybody who thought that the United States was the top dog in AI, it's not so clear. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that we should be worried?
I think the U.S. should be very worried. I don't think this is the same as Russia and the U.S. I think the scale at which China operates is mind-boggling. It's not just DeepSeek. Alibaba is another um, engineering powerhouse. They have so many software engineers. And I think there was a common misconception that China was always lagging behind in software. Yes, they were amazing at manufacturing, at hardware, at scale, at producing these, little chips with large factories because of the amount of labor that they had. But they're catching up in every single domain. The amount of talent that is coming out of China is massive. I mean, half the people that I work with at Google are Chinese. Half the people I'm sure that are in Amazon are also Chinese.
Actually, no, they're all Indian.
That's true. There's a lot of Indians and Chinese. And we can go into another rabbit hole with why India is lagging behind China. And they were both at a similar pace, but like China far outpaced India by a huge margin because of the amount of unilateral decisions that the government made to invest in infrastructure, in helping people with education, in providing them basic resources. And I think um, so. I was reading an interview with the CEO of DeepSeek, or Highflyer, their hedge fund parent company, and he has a really insightful take on why China is no longer lagging behind. He thinks that yes, in the past, like they didn't have as much talent in software. They didn't have an experience building um, complex systems with algorithms and architectures that could compete with like the Googles, the Meta, Facebook, Apples of the world. But now they're catching up. They have a lot of brain drain too. People who've worked at these tech companies in the U.S. and are going back to China because China is an amazing country. They have some of the most developed cities in the world. Like New York looks like a joke compared to Shanghai. Shanghai looks like Blade Runner, straight out of the movies. It's like the most futuristic city, uh, from what I've heard. So I think the only thing lacking was the innovation, but even that is rapidly changing, especially with the AI democratizing the ability to just churn out code, to iterate, to try a bunch of different examples. The rise of single person startups. I think we're going to see a lot more innovation from Chinese companies too. And with companies like DeepSeek, Highflyer, where they have this previous generation of founders who have amassed a certain amount of wealth, and they can pour all that money into research and side projects like DeepSeek to try out different ideas, especially with this new wave of generative AI. I think we're going to see a lot more competition from China.
Yeah, I think that that's well said. I agree, and I've been saying this for a while, but I think that the United States is kind of on the downtrend in terms of like financial markets, let's say. Maybe uh in other ways too, like in the actual real economy. But I think that, we have the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest, actually like 506 or whatever, largest companies in the United States. And the most of the gain of that has been just from 7 stocks, right? It's the Magnificent 7, right? We've got NVIDIA. I don't know if I can name them all, but it's like NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. That's the Tesla and one more.
Netflix.
Maybe Netflix, I don't know. And all of those together were a really large chunk of the market, right? And a lot of that was because of these companies just throwing money at each other, buying AI servers and whatnot. And I think that a lot of that is gonna dry up. And these companies are going to kind of tighten their belts and say, "Hey, look, we are not going to be spending these tens of billions of dollars and passing it back between ourselves." And that is going to cause the revenue of all these companies to go down. And then I think that the S&P, which is making really high gains, is gonna go down and gonna go potentially down a lot. And I am not a perma bear. I am like a huge optimist bull, but like what I see right now is bonkers. And I think it's like I know Nvidia dropped a lot, but I think it still could drop a lot more, like a lot more. And I think it could
If it
bring
drops
down.
a lot more, I'm buying. I'm going all in on NVIDIA.
I think it could bring down the rest of the market with it. Now I said it before, I'll say it again. I think the stock market in the US uh, may go down a lot more brought by all this AI hype. And I think that this AI hype is going to come to an end and it's going to come to an end fast. But with that being said, AI will still change the world and it will make everybody's life a whole lot better. But the people who are investing in these stocks are going to lose a lot of money. And that's unfortunate because I hate to see, the stocks go down. And I hate to see people lose a bunch of money on these things. But I think that, now is the time to potentially get out and, take the profits, invest in treasury bonds, because I think those are potentially undervalued right now. Lots of people talking, you could lock in your 5%, right? I think the treasury bonds are going to do really well.
That's a whole nother discussion with the decrease in people hoarding US dollars and more adoption of stable coins. I think that's a complicated issue. I do kind of agree with you. There are a lot of financial experts who say that the markets are at their peak and we're due for a correction. Um, but I disagree, strongly disagree with you when you say that the US as a whole is on its way down. I don't think that's true at all. I do think though that China is growing way faster than the US, and we're gonna see a lot from there. but China is also like a very closed economy. Geopolitically, it's not very favorable for immigrants to go there, innovate, and build like startups there. The US is still the best place for foreigners, for international startups to come to build tech companies in Silicon Valley. So I think that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. And AI, I'm very bullish on AI long term, but short term, there might be a correction. I think you might have something there.
Okay. So let me rephrase. I'm not going to say that the entire US economy is doomed, right? I'm not saying that. But I do think these seven stops or stocks that are propping up the market will potentially see really large drops in the near-ish future. Now, I can't say when because it seems like, well, you know what they say, the market can remain irrational far, far longer than you can remain solvent, right? Even though I felt pretty darn confident that NVIDIA was going to drop, I had no idea when. And uh, if,
It's impossible to time the market.
right. So, like, if I was trying to buy puts in NVIDIA, I would have bought puts in October and I would have been right, but I would have been 3 months off, which is basically wrong in a certain sense.
Actually, maybe it is possible if you're an AI powered hedge fund.
Maybe, maybe. Although all the AI powered hedge funds are kind of competing with all the other AI powered hedge funds. So then it's really hard to get an edge on everybody because it's just like everybody is competing with everybody and just getting bigger and bigger
That's
models.
when the best models will win out.
Yeah, probably, maybe. I don't know. But also I think it's really hard to predict because um I sort of feel like in the stock market, you're kind of dealing with just like a bunch of people who are just following everybody else. And
Maybe can AI can pick up on that too.
right, but it's like I don't want to say the market is full of idiots, but in a certain sense, DeepSeek came out, right? And then it was like a month later, it's like, oh no, we should do something. This is horrible. It's like, I don't know, it just feels like everybody's copying everybody. The market's full of idiots, and it's like, how do you predict what an idiot's gonna do? I don't know. That's just kind of how I feel about the stock market lately. It's just it really kind of invalidates the efficient market hypothesis where everything's already priced in. I don't think that's true. I don't think everything's already priced in. And I think that if you know what you're doing, you could potentially have an edge. Now, I'm not saying I have that edge, but I don't know. It seems like the history says that we have a little bit of an edge. Now, I feel like this finance stuff is kind of fun. I don't know. I feel like maybe we should start a finance channel or something, but no promises on that. Well, we'll probably just get into it because it seems like this Gen AI stuff has morphed into not just talking about the latest and greatest tech, but it's encompassing all aspects of life, and that's why this podcast is so interesting. But I don't know, we've been going for a while, so we should probably head out.
We're late to our meetup, so we will catch you guys on the next one.
Yes, see you guys. It's been a lot of fun.